Hello, Capel English with Plinker Systems here again, and we're continuing our series on the pneumatic target controller software. If you recall from the last video, we left off talking about manual activations, and now we're going to move over and start talking about automatic activations. But before we can do that, we really need to understand what a timeline is and what the different types of timelines are. And so if we cut over here to the software, we can see that we have three targets set up from our previous video, and they're just named targets 1, 2, and 3. But if I go to the automatic activation tab, what you will see here is the timelines. Okay, as I scroll through this, you'll see. So there are three types of timelines. There's an individual timeline, there's a target timeline, and there's a global timeline. And so a timeline consists of what we refer to as a presentation. So when the target gets activated. And each presentation has two parameters, the initial delay and the display interval. And so if we come back over here to the software, notice that for target number 1, the front timeline has three presentations, and the initial delay for the first presentation is 0 seconds, for the second presentation is 5 seconds, and for the third presentation is 10 seconds. And each presentation lasts for 2 seconds. And so there is an individual timeline for the front or the non-threat target and an individual timeline for the rear or the threat target. And when you combine those together, you get the target timeline. Recall we have three targets, so when you run all three of the target timelines together, that's the global timeline. So let's talk quickly about how to edit an individual timeline. If you notice here, when I click in the green area, I can just drag this timeline left or right. If I click it one time, it will move to the right 1/2 of a second. So it's just a quick and easy way to sort of fine-tune the adjustments. So I could, you can also edit the display interval. And the way that you do that is you click in the blue rectangle below the timeline, and it pops up a keypad where I can put another number in. So for example, 4. And now this target is going to display for 4 seconds. I may want to create a 3-second interval between them. So for example, if you look here, the pop-up says the end time is at 4 seconds. So if I want 2 seconds between the time this first presentation goes away and the second presentation begins, I simply drag it back to a 6-second initial delay. And the same goes for the rest of them. So by simply clicking in the blue area, I can change the display interval, and then I can still drag it around, which makes it very easy to adjust the timelines. Now, also notice that up here at the top there's a radio button, and it says left and right. So if we cut over here to the targets and look, you can see a label on the pivot arm on each target, and that indicates which way it's going to present. So think of the presentation as the target is going to present to either to the right or to the left. And as we mentioned earlier, these targets can be rotated 180 degrees, so depending on where you want to place the target. So maybe in a hallway, you want it to come out from the right-hand side of the hallway, it would have to present to the left. If you want it to, say, hide behind a door on the left side of the hallway, it needs to present out to the right. And so the labels on the arms just make it easy for you to see that. Now, back over on the software, if we had a target system that was presenting out to the right, then I would need to click this radio button that says right. And the reason that we do this is so that it's easy for you to understand which target is in the front and which target is in the rear, or threat, non-threat. So that's the reason for doing that. Now, I'm going to go back and set these back to their initial value of 2. And let's say that we don't want, for an individual or for a given target, we don't want one of the targets to present more than once. And there's a very quick and easy way to do this. The hard way to do it is simply click in the blue area and put 0 in. But there's a shortcut. Just by right-clicking on it, you can set the display interval to 0. And so if I didn't want the front target or the non-threat target to present at all in this target timeline, then I would simply set them all to 0. Now, to get them back, all I've got to do is click the Show Hidden button, and they will pop back up at a time or a display interval of 2 seconds that you can then edit. So let's take a look at that. Let's say that we want on target number 1, we want the non-threat to present for 2 seconds, and we want the threat target to present for 4 seconds. And so what's going to happen is that both targets are going to present, but 2 seconds later, the non-threat's going to go away and become a threat. And we can do that. Let's do that. Let's make them all, say, 6 seconds. So we're going to have a 2-second delay. And then notice this ends at 10 seconds, so we need to put this guy at 12 seconds. And then we're going to make him display for 4 seconds. Okay, that was an individual timeline. So let's look at the software. And if we look at the software, I just reset target 1 timeline so that all 3 targets have the exact same timeline. Now, if I click the Run All button, this is going to run the global timeline. So let's cut over to the target camera, and I'm going to click the Run All button. And notice that they're all running the exact same timeline. And so that is a global timeline. If we were to stagger the presentation so that target 1 presents first, and then the initial delay of target 2 doesn't start until target 1 finishes, and likewise, then we can make these the targets really do anything that we want to do. And we've got some other videos out there that talk about that. But so let's keep going and look at a couple of other things about the automatic activation tab. So we have the ability to both load and save timelines. Now, this particular timeline, you can see here in the center of the screen, it says the current timeline is timeline 1. So once you have loaded a timeline, every time you make a change, it gets saved automatically, okay? But if I wanted to save this under a different name, I can click the Save Timeline, and I can choose to overwrite an existing timeline, or I can save it under a new name. And so I can put here, let's just call this Demo Timeline. And then I can edit a description, which makes it easier for me to understand when I go to retrieve them what I'm looking at. So I click Save. Now notice the current timeline is Demo Timeline. And if I go to Load Timeline, notice that Demo Timeline shows up at the top of the list, and that's because it was the last file that we edited. And at this point, if I were to make changes to the Demo Timeline, then obviously it would be different from the Timeline 1, which is what we were using. So here is Timeline 1, which looks the same, And if I go load demo timeline and I make a change, so let's just move these guys out. Now, as soon as I make that change, it gets saved. So when I load timeline 1, notice that the third presentation jumped back to its original position. And if I load demo timeline, it jumps back out where I just edited it. So there's a very quick and easy way to save timelines and give them names and descriptions that are very meaningful to you. So just very quickly in review, we've got the left-right radio button at the top of the timeline. We've got individual timelines that control both the front and rear targets. We've got the target timeline and a way to run those with this button here to run both the front and rear target on an individual target system, and then we've got the run all button, which runs the global timeline. So that's it for this video. We'll come back and we'll talk about shortcuts. So stay tuned. Now, we need you to help us out. Please like, please share, and please subscribe. If you've got questions, leave them in the comments area below. We'll be happy to answer them. If you've got ideas for videos you'd like us to do, then do that as well. Give us a shout. We'll see if we can't make that happen. Thanks for watching.